Have you ever wondered if your surname hides a secret history? What if the name your family has carried for centuries was once feared across Ireland? Imagine discovering that your ancestors were not peaceful farmers or respected nobles, but rebels, fugitives, and warriors who challenged powerful kings, defied English rule, and lived beyond the law. Throughout Irish history, some families earned reputations so dangerous that merely speaking their name could inspire fear. These were clans accused of rebellion, cattle raiding, piracy, or refusing to obey foreign rulers. While history often labeled them outlaws, many Irish people remember them as heroes who fought to protect their land, traditions, and freedom. Today, we're counting down 15 outlaw Irish surnames whose stories are filled with battles, betrayals, revenge, and survival. Some of these names still exist today, carried proudly by millions of descendants around the world. Let's begin with number 15. 15. O'Driscoll. The surname O'Driscoll comes from the Irish O Hidershiel, meaning descendant of Idarshiel. Long before English ships dominated the Irish Sea, the O'Driscolls ruled much of southwest County Cork. Unlike many Irish clans who depended on farming, the O'Driscolls built their wealth on the sea. They controlled important harbors, fishing grounds, and busy trading routes. Their castles overlooked dangerous waters where every passing merchant ship could become an opportunity. But with power came accusations. English officials frequently described the O'Driscolls as pirates. Irish historians often tell a different story. According to local tradition, the clan collected tolls from ships passing through waters they considered their own. Foreign merchants called it piracy. The O'Driscolls called it taxation. One of their strongest fortresses was Baltimore Castle, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. From here, clan leaders watched every ship entering their territory. Their reputation grew even darker during the 16th century, when England expanded its control over Ireland. The O'Driscolls refused to surrender many of their traditional rights. Some members openly traded with Spain, despite English restrictions. Others allegedly helped enemy ships find safe harbors along Ireland's rugged coastline. To English governors, they became dangerous lawbreakers. To many local Irish communities, they remained protectors who refused to submit. Their fortunes changed dramatically. After English military campaigns weakened Gaelic Ireland, lands were confiscated. Castles fell into foreign hands. Many O'Driscolls lost their traditional power, yet their surnames survived. Today, descendants of the O'Driscolls can be found throughout Ireland, Britain, America, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Their story reminds us that history often depends on who is telling it. Were they pirates, or simply Irish rulers defending their ancient rights? The answer may never be completely clear. 14. O'Rourke. Next comes one of Ireland's most fearless ruling families. The surname O'Rourke, or O'Ruarc, means descendant of Ruarc. For centuries, the O'Rourkes ruled the kingdom of Briefny, covering parts of today's County Leitrim and County Cavan. Unlike many peaceful kings, the O'Rourkes developed a reputation for constant warfare. Neighbors feared their cavalry. Enemies dreaded their surprise attacks. English officials often described them as rebellious troublemakers who refused to recognize English authority. One famous clan leader, Brian O'Rourke, became one of the greatest enemies of the English crown during the late 16th century. When Spanish ships wrecked along Ireland's western coast after the defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588, Brian gave shelter to surviving Spanish sailors. To Queen Elizabeth I, this was an act of treason. English forces demanded his surrender. Instead, Brian escaped across Scotland seeking allies. Eventually, he was arrested, returned to England, and executed in London in 1591. His death turned him into a symbol of Irish resistance. English records labeled him an outlaw. Irish tradition remembers him as a patriot who refused to betray those seeking refuge. Even after his execution, members of the O'Rourke family continued resisting English rule for generations. Today, the surname remains especially common in northwestern Ireland. Its history reflects the difficult choices many Gaelic leaders faced during England's conquest of Ireland. Dat or fight. 13. MacCarthy, the surname MacCarthy, meaning son of Carthage, belongs to one of Ireland's greatest royal dynasties. The MacCarthys once ruled large parts of Munster. Their territory included fertile farmland, mountain passes, and strategic castles. Although they were recognized as kings by Gaelic tradition, English authorities rarely accepted their independence. This disagreement led to centuries of conflict. Branches of the MacCarthy family frequently formed alliances with other rebellious clans. They resisted English expansion whenever possible. Some family leaders launched raids against settlements controlled by English officials. Others offered protection to families fleeing government forces. As English plantations spread across southern Ireland, the MacCarthys increasingly lost their lands. Many refused to recognize English ownership. Instead, they continued living according to traditional Irish law. Because of this, government records often labeled them rebels. One famous member, Florence MacCarthy, spent years caught between loyalty to his Irish relatives and pressure from English rulers. Neither side fully trusted him. He was imprisoned for much of his later life, accused of encouraging rebellion. His downfall demonstrated how dangerous politics had become for Gaelic nobles. Even powerful kings could suddenly become prisoners. Despite losing much of their wealth, the MacCarthy name survived. Today it remains among Ireland's best-known surnames. For many descendants, it symbolizes resilience through centuries of conquest. 12. O'Sullivan, our final surname in Part 1, belongs to another legendary Irish family. The surname O'Sullivan, from O'Sulliabine, means descendant of Sulliaban. The O'Sullivans ruled large territories in southwest Ireland. Like many Gaelic clans, they frequently fought neighboring families. But their greatest battles came against England during the 9 Years' War. The O'Sullivans joined Irish resistance against English forces. One leader became especially famous, Donald Cam O'Sullivan Beer. After English armies captured much of his territory in 1602, Donald refused to surrender. Instead, he gathered hundreds of followers and began one of the most remarkable marches in Irish history. Traveling through winter conditions, his people crossed mountains, forests, rivers, and enemy territory. English soldiers constantly attacked them. Food became scarce. Many died from hunger, exhaustion, or battle. When the journey finally ended, only a small number of survivors remained. Although the march ended in tragedy, Donald's determination became legendary. English officials considered him a dangerous rebel. Irish history remembers him as one of the bravest leaders of Gaelic Ireland. The O'Sullivan surname spread across the world after later generations emigrated during difficult times, including the Great Famine. Today, it is one of the most recognized Irish surnames globally. Behind the name lies a history of courage, sacrifice, and refusal to surrender against overwhelming odds. 11. O'Brien. The surname O'Byrne or O'Brien means descendant of Bran. For centuries, the O'Byrnes ruled the rugged mountains of County Wicklow, just south of Dublin. Their homeland was one of the most difficult regions in Ireland for any invading army to control. Thick forests, narrow valleys, and steep hills gave the clan a natural advantage. Whenever English soldiers marched into Wicklow, the O'Byrnes simply disappeared into the mountains. Then they struck without warning. They attacked supply wagons, ambushed patrols, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. English commanders became increasingly frustrated. One of the most famous leaders of the clan was Feach McHugh O'Byrne, one of Ireland's greatest military commanders. In 1580, during the Second Desmond Rebellion, English forces marched into the Wicklow Mountains expecting an easy victory. Instead, they walked directly into an ambush at the Battle of Glenmalure. High among the hills, Irish warriors attacked from every direction. The English army suffered one of its worst defeats in Ireland. For the crown, Feach McHugh became one of the most wanted men in the country. Large rewards were offered for his capture. For years, he escaped every attempt to arrest him. Eventually, he was betrayed and killed in 1597. His death ended the career of one of Ireland's greatest guerrilla leaders, but his reputation lived on. To English officials, he was an outlaw. To many Irish families, he became a legendary hero. Today, the O'Byrne surname remains closely associated with courage, independence, and the mountains that once protected their ancestors. 10. O'Toole, O'Tuathail, closely connected to the O'Byrnes, were another powerful Wicklow family. The O'Tooles. The surname comes from O'Tuathail, meaning descendant of Tuathal. Like their neighbors, the O'Tooles ruled mountainous territory where English authority was weak. For generations, they refused to pay taxes demanded by English officials. Instead, they followed traditional Gaelic laws and recognized their own clan leaders. This constant resistance brought them into conflict with Dublin Castle. English records frequently accused the O'Tooles of cattle raiding. In medieval Ireland, however, cattle represented wealth. Raiding livestock was often part of clan warfare, rather than ordinary crime. The O'Tooles became experts at fast attacks. Small groups of horsemen would ride into enemy lands, seize cattle, and disappear into the hills before soldiers could respond. Their knowledge of the Wicklow Mountains made them almost impossible to defeat. Several members of the clan joined major Irish rebellions during the 16th century. English governors repeatedly described them as wild Irish, who refused to obey the law. Yet local communities often relied upon the O'Tooles for protection against invading armies. Even after English plantations spread across eastern Ireland, the clan maintained its identity. Today, the O'Toole surname is found across Ireland and among Irish communities worldwide. Its history reflects centuries of resistance against outside control. 9. MacMahon. The surname MacMahon, meaning son of the bear, belongs to one of Ulster's most respected warrior families. The MacMahons ruled large parts of present-day County Monaghan. Their territory bordered lands controlled by powerful rivals, meaning warfare was almost constant. The clan became famous for producing skilled fighters who defended their kingdom against both neighboring clans and English armies. As English influence expanded northward, the MacMahons refused to surrender their independence. Several leaders openly supported Irish resistance movements. English authorities accused them of harboring rebels and organizing attacks against government settlements. One of the family's greatest tragedies occurred during the late 16th century. Clan leader Hugh Roe MacMahon was invited to negotiate with English officials. Instead of receiving fair treatment, he was arrested. Soon afterwards, he was executed. His death shocked Gaelic Ireland. Many Irish leaders realized that negotiations with English authorities could easily end in betrayal. The execution encouraged even greater resistance throughout Ulster. Although much of their land was later confiscated during the plantation of Ulster, the MacMahon name survived. Today, descendants can be found across Ireland, France, Australia, Canada, Britain, and the United States. The bear in their surname remains a fitting symbol of strength and endurance. 8. O'More, O'Morda, at number 8, is one of Ireland's most determined rebel families. The surname O'More, or O'Morda, means descendant of the great or noble one. The O'Mores ruled much of what is now County Louth. Their problems with England began earlier than many other clans. When English plantations expanded into Central Ireland during the 16th century, O'More lands were among the first to be confiscated. The clan refused to accept the loss. Instead, they launched a campaign of resistance that lasted for generations. Perhaps their most famous leader was Rory O'More. In 1641, he became one of the principal organizers of the Great Irish Rebellion. The plan aimed to seize important English strongholds before government forces could react. Although the rebellion eventually grew beyond its original plan, Rory became one of the movement's most recognizable leaders. English authorities declared him a traitor and outlaw. They placed rewards on his capture, yet he managed to evade them for years. Supporters hid him in remote villages, forests, and friendly estates. His ability to disappear became legendary. Even after his death, songs and stories celebrated his courage. The O'More surname became closely linked with Irish resistance. While government records remembered them as dangerous rebels, many ordinary Irish people remembered them as defenders of their homeland. Today, the surname survives around the world, carrying with it centuries of determination and resilience. 7. O'Neill, O'Neill, at number 7, is one of the most powerful surnames in Irish history. The surname O'Neill, or O'Neill, means descendant of Neil. The family claimed descent from Neil of the Nine Hostages, one of Ireland's legendary high kings. For nearly 1,000 years, the O'Neills ruled much of Ulster. Their power was so great that even English kings struggled to control them, but during the 16th century, conflict between the O'Neills and the English crown reached its peak. The most famous leader of the family was Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone. Although he had received an English education and held an English title, Hugh secretly built alliances with Gaelic clans across Ireland. He believed that English expansion threatened the traditional Irish way of life. In 1594, war erupted. Known today as the 9 Years' War, it became the largest rebellion against English rule in Tudor Ireland. Hugh O'Neill proved to be an exceptional military commander. His army combined traditional Irish fighters with modern European weapons. They defeated English forces at the famous Battle of the Yellow Ford in 1598. The defeat shocked London. It was one of England's worst military disasters in Ireland. For several years, Hugh O'Neill controlled much of the island outside English-held towns. English officials declared him a traitor. Rewards were offered for his capture. His supporters were branded rebels. Yet many Irish people saw him as their last great hope for independence. Eventually, overwhelming English reinforcements forced the Irish alliance to retreat. After signing the Treaty of Mellifont in 1603, Hugh retained some of his titles, but remained under constant suspicion. 4 years later, fearing arrest, he secretly left Ireland in an event remembered as the Flight of the Earls. His departure marked the end of Gaelic Ireland. The once powerful O'Neill dynasty lost much of its land. Yet the surname remains one of the most recognized Irish names in the world. 6. O'Donnell, O'Domhnaill, standing beside the O'Neills throughout much of Irish history, was another legendary clan, the O'Donnells. Their surname comes from O'Domhnaill, meaning descendant of Domhnall. The O'Donnells ruled the kingdom of Tyrconnell, now County Donegal. Like the O'Neills, they fiercely resisted English expansion. Perhaps the most famous member of the family was Red Hugh O'Donnell. As a teenager, Red Hugh was kidnapped by English authorities and imprisoned inside Dublin Castle. The government hoped to use him as a hostage. But Red Hugh refused to accept captivity. In one of the most remarkable escapes in Irish history, he climbed out of the castle during winter and fled through snow-covered mountains. The journey nearly killed him. Several companions died from exposure before reaching safety. After returning home, Red Hugh immediately prepared for war. He joined forces with Hugh O'Neill. Together, they led the Irish alliance during the 9 Years' War. English commanders viewed Red Hugh as one of the most dangerous men in Ireland. His ability to inspire warriors made him a constant threat. In 1602, while seeking Spanish assistance, Red Hugh died in Spain under mysterious circumstances. Some historians believe illness claimed his life. Others have long suspected poisoning. Whatever the truth, his death was a devastating blow to Irish resistance. Today, Red Hugh remains one of Ireland's greatest national heroes. His surname continues to carry a reputation for courage and determination. 5. Kavanagh, Kavanagh, the surname Kavanagh, originally Kavanagh, belongs to one of Ireland's oldest royal families. The Kavanaghs descended from the ancient kings of Leinster. Unlike many noble families who accepted English titles, the Kavanaghs often refused outside authority. This stubborn independence frequently placed them in conflict with English officials. One famous leader was Art MacMurrough Kavanagh. During the late 14th century, Art became one of England's greatest enemies in Ireland. He rejected English laws. He refused to surrender his ancestral lands. Whenever English armies invaded Leinster, Art launched swift attacks before disappearing into forests and mountains. His tactics frustrated English commanders for decades. Several expensive military campaigns failed to defeat him. At one point, even King Richard II personally traveled to Ireland hoping to crush the rebellion. Despite commanding thousands of soldiers, the king achieved only temporary success. Once the royal army withdrew, Art regained control of much of his territory. English writers described him as a dangerous outlaw. Irish tradition remembers him as a fearless king who defended his homeland against overwhelming odds. His victories inspired generations of later Irish leaders. Even after English power eventually expanded, the Kavanagh name remained a symbol of resistance. Today, descendants proudly carry one of Ireland's oldest royal surnames. 4. O'Connor, O'Conchover. At number 4 is another surname deeply connected with Irish kingship. The surname O'Connor, or O'Conchover, means descendant of Conchovar. The O'Connor dynasty ruled Connacht for centuries. Several members of the family became High Kings of Ireland. Their influence stretched across Western Ireland long before the Norman invasion. As foreign powers expanded into Ireland, the O'Connors fought to preserve their kingdom. Generations of clan leaders led armies into battle against Norman lords and later English governors. One famous ruler, Phelim O'Connor, spent much of his life defending Connacht. Another, E. D. O'Connor, continued resisting foreign control despite repeated invasions. Over time, English authorities gradually reduced O'Connor territory. Many family members refused to recognize the new political order. Some continued leading local resistance. Others supported later Irish rebellions. Government records increasingly describe them as rebellious chieftains, unwilling to obey the crown, yet among the Irish people, they remained descendants of ancient kings. Even after losing much of their land, the O'Connor family preserved its identity. Today, it is one of Ireland's most common surnames, with millions of descendants living across Europe, North America, Australia, and beyond. Its history reflects the rise and fall of one of Ireland's greatest royal dynasties. Point 3. Fitzgerald. The Fitzgerald surname has a unique place in Irish history. Unlike many Gaelic clans, the Fitzgeralds were originally of Norman origin. Their ancestors arrived in Ireland after the Norman invasion in the 12th century. The surname means son of Gerald. Over time, however, many Fitzgerald families adopted Irish customs, spoke the Irish language, and formed alliances with Gaelic clans. English officials eventually complained that the Fitzgeralds had become more Irish than the Irish themselves. Perhaps no branch became more famous than the Earls of Desmond and Munster. For centuries, they ruled enormous territories across southern Ireland. But their growing independence worried the English crown. In 1569, the First Desmond Rebellion erupted. The Fitzgeralds led thousands of followers against English rule. Although the rebellion ended in defeat, tensions continued to rise. 10 years later came the Second Desmond Rebellion. This conflict lasted from 1579 until 1583 and devastated much of southern Ireland. English forces burned villages, destroyed crops, and seized Fitzgerald lands. The Earl of Desmond became one of the most wanted men in Ireland. For months he lived as a fugitive, moving from forest to forest, while loyal supporters secretly supplied him with food. Eventually he was betrayed. His death effectively ended the rebellion. To the English government, the Fitzgeralds had become dangerous traitors. To many Irish families, they became symbols of resistance against foreign control. Today, the Fitzgerald surname remains one of the best-known names in Ireland and throughout the English-speaking world. 2. O'Brien at number 2 stands one of Ireland's greatest royal dynasties. The surname O'Brien or O'Brien means descendant of Brian. That Brian was none other than Brian Boru, the High King of Ireland, who defeated Viking forces at the famous Battle of Clontarf in 1014. For centuries afterwards, the O'Briens ruled much of County Clare and neighbouring regions. Because of their royal blood, they were among the most respected families in Gaelic Ireland. As English influence spread, the O'Briens faced a difficult choice. Some members negotiated with English rulers to protect their people. Others resisted openly. Several branches joined Irish rebellions, while others secretly supplied warriors fighting against English armies. This divided loyalty made the surname especially difficult for English officials to understand. Some O'Briens served the crown, others fought against it. One famous leader was Murrough O'Brien, whose political decisions remain debated by historians today. Other branches continued supporting Gaelic resistance well into the 17th century. Although not every O'Brien became an outlaw, many local leaders refused to surrender their traditional authority. Their castles often became centers of resistance. English records occasionally described rebellious O'Briens as dangerous insurgents. Yet, ordinary Irish people continued viewing them as descendants of Ireland's greatest king. Even today, Brian Boru remains one of the country's most celebrated historical figures. His descendants proudly carry one of Ireland's oldest and most respected surnames. 1. O'Neill at number 1 is the surname that became the ultimate symbol of Irish resistance. O'Neill. While we discussed Hugh O'Neill earlier in our countdown, the family's overall legacy places them at the very top. No other Gaelic dynasty challenged English power for as long, or as successfully, as the O'Neills. For centuries they ruled Ulster, they commanded vast armies, they formed alliances across Ireland, and they inspired generations of warriors. During the 9 Years' War, Hugh O'Neill united clans that had spent centuries fighting one another. His goal was extraordinary: to preserve Gaelic Ireland. At first, his strategy worked brilliantly. Irish victories shocked England. Some historians believe the rebellion came closer to ending English rule in Ireland than any previous uprising. But after years of exhausting warfare, superior English resources slowly turned the tide. The decisive Battle of Kinsale in 1601 changed everything. Irish and Spanish forces were defeated. Hope for victory faded. Although Hugh O'Neill survived the war, he realized his position had become impossible. In 1607, he joined other Gaelic leaders in the Flight of the Earls, leaving Ireland forever. Their departure marked the end of the ancient Gaelic political system. English plantations soon transformed Ulster. Traditional clan lands were confiscated, castles changed ownership, entire communities were displaced. Yet one thing survived: the surname. Today, millions of people around the world proudly carry the name O'Neill. For some, it represents family heritage. For others, it symbolizes courage, resilience, and the determination to preserve identity against overwhelming odds. That is why the O'Neill surname takes the number 1 position on our countdown. Final thoughts looking back at all 15 surnames. One thing becomes clear: the word outlaw does not always tell the full story. Many of these families were labeled criminals because they challenged the government of their time. Others defended their ancestral lands according to ancient Irish law, even when those traditions conflicted with English rule. History often depends on perspective. To one side, these clans were rebels. To the other, they were protectors. Some certainly committed acts that today would be considered crimes, including warfare, raiding, and political violence. But those actions took place during centuries of conflict in which power, land, and survival were constantly at stake. Their stories remind us that surnames are more than names on official documents. They carry memories, they preserve history, they connect modern families with people who lived through extraordinary times. Whether your surname appears on today's list or not, every Irish family name has a story waiting to be discovered. Perhaps your own ancestors were farmers. Perhaps they were poets. Perhaps they were merchants. Or perhaps, somewhere deep within your family tree, there was someone who refused to surrender, stood against impossible odds, and earned a place in history. Thank you for joining us on this journey through 15 outlaw Irish surnames. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next exploration into the fascinating history of Irish surnames, Celtic traditions, and forgotten family stories. Until next time, Slán go foil, goodbye for now.